this work? Oh, it does. Great. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. It's truly an honor to be a part of such a prestigious event. To begin, I would like to ask everybody in this room to imagine for a moment. Imagine a group to which you belong. Think about your position within that group specifically. Think about how you fit in and how you belong. Next, I would like to ask you to imagine how you identify with that group. How strongly you identify. Weak or concrete. Think about the position of everybody else in that group. And now how everybody else in that group identifies. And do you think that these concepts of network position and social identity are related? Now, this is what my team wanted to figure out. Together with Dr. Michael Quayle, Mackenzie Lynch, myself, Kev O'Malley, and Susan Fennell, we, way back in the beginning of this process, began thinking about group dynamics. We immediately understood that the core goal of social psychology is to empirically solve the paradox between an individual's unique mental processes and how the social world influences these processes. In order to do this, it is necessary to study social interaction. The problem, however, with studying social interaction is that human beings are notoriously unpredictable, and unpredictability makes our research difficult to replicate. Without replication, the applicability of our findings to reality is premature. As researchers, we are under increasing scrutiny and pressures to increase the amount of control within our experiments. And one method of doing this is to reduce social interaction, because the heightened number of social beings interacting reduces predictability. But I just said that the main goal of social psychology for us was to study social interaction, so you can see the really frustrating process we went through when trying to determine if one's social identity is related to their network position. Now, when analysing group dynamics, one method of attaining this increased control while embracing the experimental method is through the use of the minimal group paradigm. The minimal group paradigm traditionally involves randomly allocating individuals into a number of groups, usually 2 groups, and allowing them to interact through resource allocation, usually money. The core strength of the minimal group paradigm is that it reduces social interaction to the basic property of social exchange. Members share the distinction of being members of the same group alone and nothing more. Now, this is very important because it allows researchers adequate control to study social interaction while reducing many potential confounds. Researchers therefore have adequate control to study social phenomena through interaction. However, this interaction often takes place and is inferred through paper matrices and code numbers. And I believe historically this is an inherent problem with these designs. I don't believe an individual filling out a piece of paper is really representative of human interaction. In fact, I believe the traditional minimal group studies are too empty of social interaction. However, their process of control is necessary. So my team had a problem. So we decided to build on the limitations of the original minimal group studies. And in doing so, we utilized the VIAPPL, the Virtual Interaction Application, developed in part by Dr. Michael Quayle of the University of Limerick. This VIAPPL maintains control, but it increases social interaction. Instead of interacting with a piece of paper, individuals play as one of these avatars, and they interact with other avatars in a social game. Within this platform, social exchange is still the only method of interaction. However, individuals can study the feedback process of group behavior, and they can adapt with this information. Social interaction or individual behavior is therefore more reflective of real-world interaction while still maintaining control. In the original minimal group studies, Henry Tajfel developed social identity theory to explain the consistent sense of in-group identification and out-group discrimination that he witnessed. Tajfel and his colleagues theorized that categorization alone was enough to elicit in-group favoritism, in-group bias, and behavior that would ensure favorable comparisons against an out-group. However, no study had attempted to model the relationship between this sense of identification and one's literal position within a social group's hierarchy. This position has been of historical importance to individuals in the field of mathematics and economics who utilize social network analysis. Social network analysis monitors the interactions between individuals with the goal of highlighting relative positions within one's group. Metrics based on behavioral history provide an objective way of studying a group's nature. In simpler terms, social network analysis has historically been used to study the patterns of behavior between individuals in order to provide a picture of the overarching structure of the entire network. It is still unknown to what extent that psychometrics of identity correspond to social network position metrics, and that was the goal of our study. We explored methods of mapping psychometrics of identity onto social network position metrics, and if successful, our study could start the engine of exploring how the subjective construction of one's identity corresponds to group behavior, objectively calculated as position metrics. So, what did we do? Using the VIAPPL, we created an environment containing 2 groups, of 4 individuals per group, a green group and a purple group. We studied the interaction of 320 individuals over the course of 20 rounds. It was the responsibility of these individuals to interact however they pleased by allocating 1 token per round to whomever they chose. They could give to in-group members, out-group members, or themselves through self-giving. Within this environment, a token operationalized a resource. At the end of the 20th round, the game was terminated and individuals were asked to fulfill a post-game self-report identity questionnaire. Now, I would like to ask you to imagine once more for a moment. Imagine you are lost in a remote area with some friends. You guys are starving for food, you need sustenance, and it's your responsibility to go and get food for camp, because luckily there's a jungle nearby. Now, if this was me and if it was a horror movie, I'd definitely be the guy who has to go into the jungle and probably find food and die while my friends get saved by a helicopter. But nevertheless, you guys have to go in and get food, so you set off on an adventure. And you look around for ages, you can't find anything, kind of like research. And you eventually you stumble upon a grand array of fruits. But the problem again is you have no idea what these fruits are. The place is new, you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know which fruits are safe, you don't know which fruits are poisonous. But you know through your scientific intuition that the only way to know which fruits are good, which are bad, is to test them. The nefarious or clean-cut methods of testing these fruits are beyond the scope of this presentation. However, the scientific principle stands true. When faced with unknown terrain, it is important to explore many possible discoveries in order to draw a map for future researchers to use in the dark. Attempting to cross-validate identity psychometrics and social network position metrics is in a sense uncharted waters. In order to draw a map for future researchers to use, it was important to explore many measures. We had to test many fruit. We had to explore many relationships. In order to provide a clear picture of identity perception, our post-game self-report identity questionnaire was designed to calculate in-group identification, out-group identification, perceived in-group cohesion, and intergroup identity. And in order to determine whether psychometrics of identity correspond to social network position metrics, the following social network position metrics were calculated. In degree magnitude, the sum of all tokens received, regardless of group. Out degree magnitude, the sum of all tokens given away, regardless of group. General in degree centrality, the sum of unique others that allocated a token to an individual, regardless of group. General out degree centrality, the sum of unique others that you allocated tokens to, regardless of group. A closeness centrality, the ratio of the number of individuals to which you gave tokens compared to the entire number of individuals in the entire network. Betweenness centrality, the measure of how an individual acted as a link in a network, in other words, a pivot in which tokens are being exchanged through. Clustering coefficient, the rate at which individuals behaved within clusters in the network. Out degree preference, a score calculated by subtracting an individual's out-group out degree from their in-group out degree in order to determine to which group an individual gave most. Greater positive integers suggest a greater rate of in-group favoritism. And finally, in-degree difference, a score calculated by subtracting an individual's out-group in-degree from their in-group in-degree to determine to which group an individual received from most. Greater positive integers suggest a greater in-group receiving majority. The heightened number of variables assessed compromised our alpha level to a score of 0.004. However, within this environment, we still found some interesting relationships. We found a significant positive correlation between an individual's in-group identification and their out-degree preference. In other words, the more an individual identified with their group, the more they gave to them. We also found that this relationship was increased for the intergroup identification context, which correlated positively for individuals who gave at a greater rate to their in-group members. Now, within this intergroup identification context, we also found a significant negative relationship for intergroup identification and general out-degree, which suggests that the more you make contact with out-group members, the more your in-group identification dissolves. Our study highlighted that many variables would have shared a relationship if studied in isolation and not within the confines of our restricted alpha level. But our study served its purpose. The exploratory nature of our study did serve its purpose. It highlighted many paths and potential others to take when attempting to model psychometrics of identity onto social network position metrics. I can say with confidence that it is in the interest of my team and hopefully many others to explore this interesting non-significant findings of our study, which you'll hopefully read about in future publications. Attempting to model psychometrics of identity and social network position metrics builds on their individual limitations in providing transparency when analyzing group dynamics. A multiple methods approach like this one has many advantages. Mainly, self-reports provide researchers with a manner in assessing how individuals they themselves assess an intergroup structure consciously, while behavioral metrics allow researchers an objective overview of the observable behavioral engagement. I believe a multiple methods approach will be useful for anybody in the fields of mathematics, economics, psychology, and even clinicians who are interested in studying behavioral change, opinion change, and norm development cycles. Thank you. That was short, snappy stuff. Anyone has any questions, please?
Great, thanks, Ryan, for that very dynamic presentation. So does anybody here have questions for Ryan?
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that idea that people who gave toward the group have a stronger sense of identity. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So is it the idea that the more you invest in the group, the stronger you feel? Or would you need to control it from personality or something there? And what about the people who were more recipient? Would they also feel a strong sense of identity or not?
Yeah, it's very interesting. My team also did a study in which we assessed whether individuals would use their in-group as a vehicle for self-interest, because we also were concerned about whether or not people were just giving to their in-group because forms or chains of reciprocation within that in-group provided their best way of getting resource, and then they could manipulate that resource and just give to themselves as well by having lots of streams of income as well as their own to maximize profit. So